The Stalin era left an irreparable mark on the history of the countries of the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc. Stalin's policies had an incredible impact on the economics and demographics of the countries, thereby affecting the culture and leaving an imprint on the streets of former Soviet cities. But how exactly was the Stalinist ideology characterized by strict totalitarianism and propaganda of the only ruling party reflected in architecture? And why is Stalinist Neoclassicism considered totalitarian? Let's find out in this video. Right after the October Revolution during mostly the 1920s, the USSR, together with other post-war European countries, was transitioning to modernism, as a result rejecting many paradigms and principles of the past in many sciences, arts, and, of course, architecture. Modernist architecture was way more utilitarian, of course, due to the lack of materials and money after the First World War and the October Revolution in case of the USSR. But the key is that architects were trying to make it completely different from the traditional imperialistic styles of architecture. The architecture of that time was almost nothing like Art Nouveau that was popular throughout Russian Empire in the end of the 19th century till the 1910s. Even though modernist buildings were relatively cheap in production, they still had very futuristic and uncommon shapes and look, reflecting the political objective of the state. The Soviet Union at that time aroused the interest of many world masters and architects, since the country had a very suitable experimental ground for this. In 1924, Lenin died, and Stalin took over the country. Stalin had a completely different outlook on architecture. He also wanted buildings to be huge and mind-blowing, but in case of Lenin, buildings strove to be new and dissimilar. Then in case of Stalin, he liked classical and antique shapes. That's why many constructions built between the 1930s and 50s are considered neoclassical. But in his architecture, Stalin put definitely not fewer political components than Lenin did. Through classic architecture, he tried to show how great the historical background is behind the countries of the Soviet Union. But instead of using all these ancient Greek myths and legends and Greek gods and heroes as central figures, Stalin used simple plots about the October Revolution that were understandable to everyone. And after the 1945, he also started using plots about the Second World War, about the heroism of the USSR in that war, and he also used Soviet workers, poets, scientists, and of course, Lenin as central figures. I just realized that I forgot to mention one incredibly important thing. Stalin was actually one of the two leaders of the USSR who started a cult of himself. The cult manifested itself in literature, paintings, monuments, and of course, Stalin named different buildings after himself. For example, the Stalin Palace, now called the Soldatov Palace, located in Perm, Russia, or the Palace of Science and Culture, located in Warsaw, Poland, was also previously named after Stalin. Yes, this building is not really an example of neoclassicism architecture, but I'm now talking more like in general. Almost every Soviet city had what was called a club of culture, or a palace of culture, where members of the Communist Party would come together and watch concerts or spend events. And this is one of those buildings. This building was built in 1959 and located in the village of Oskachka, east of the city of Perm, Russia. And yes, even the villages had similar government buildings. And despite the fact that this building is located in the rural area of the country, it does not limit itself by its rich exterior. It's pretty fancy on the inside as well. Most of the building has floors of marble, walls and columns are lined with plaster patterns, and ceilings are decorated with crystal chandeliers. In fact, such a building has everything that an ordinary Soviet person does not have. Many people might believe that its totalitarianism was simply in the inability of architects to implement the projects different than what the party liked. Thousands of projects by the supporters of the avant-garde movement that was still popular throughout many countries of Western Europe and North America were simply denied by the party and considered unacceptable. But this is of course far not the only reason why. The Stalinist architecture was similar to Nazi Germany architecture to some extent and used similar methods of pressuring and influencing people's minds. Both Stalin and Hitler perceived monumental buildings as a powerful weapon. Both Stalin and Hitler believed that their political supremacy directly depended on erecting structures and buildings that would dazzle and intimidate multitudes, inhibiting their bodily position to act critically and assertively. And indeed, when you walk out of a two-story wooden building where most of the people in the Soviet Union lived at the time, and you see such a huge monumental palace, you actually realize that you're just a tiny screw in this huge mechanism called socialism. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to hit that like button and leave a comment down below. And I'm actually interested, what do you think about Stalinist architecture? And do you even consider it totalitarian? Anyway, see you guys in the next video. Bye.